Yeah, I cannot hear anything, so should be good. All right. And so, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for being with us today. And so today I have the honor to introduce our speaker, Professor Zhenchao Qian. And Prof. Qian is a professor of sociology and the interim director of population studies and training center at Brown University. Before coming to Brown, he served as department chair during the last 5 years at Ohio State University. He is an elected fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. His research areas include social demography, stratification, and inequality. More specifically, he studies who marries whom and who lives with whom, their patterns, trends, and consequences. Such assertive mating patterns help reveal openness of stratification systems, social distance among social groups, and also salience of group boundaries. And Prof. Qian also investigate how certain mating patterns, changes in marital status, and marital transitions influence individuals' well-being. Prof. Qian is also interested in topics including racial identification among children born to interracial couples, immigrant integration in the United States, and social and family change in China. And so actually, I started to read Prof. Qian's work since I was a graduate student. And so as part of the course readings or read for preliminary exams. And so Prof. Qian is a prolific and highly impactful family sociologist and demographer. So his work appeared in many prestigious journals, including American Sociological Review, Demography, Journal of Marriage and Family, Journal of Ethnic and Migration Studies, Social Forces, Social Science Research, and on and on. And so without further ado, let's welcome Prof. Qian to share his work on uni history and midlife health outcomes. And so following the CFPR convention, we still let Prof. Qian to finish the presentation first, or like in around 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have a Q&A session. But of course, along the way, if you find you have like burning questions and so on, feel free to type them in the chat box, and we'll collect them together at the end of the talk. Okay, Prof. Qian, please.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Mu, for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. And I want to apologize. I have to blur the background. I'm in a hotel room in Washington, D.C. right now. Happy to share my ongoing work, union history and midlife health outcomes. I would like to introduce, also acknowledge my co-authors, Alex Wambach. He is a PhD student at Brown, and also my two former colleagues at Ohio State, Hui Zhen and Christy Williams. So everybody knows, marriage and health, the relationship between the two, it is very well established that married individuals have substantially lower risks of morbidity and mortality and enjoy better health than unmarried people. So typically people try to explain why that's the case. I think, there's this, the marital resource model that emphasize that, married individuals are healthier than unmarried counterparts. But then there's also the other argument saying talking about the crisis model, that marital status differences in health are really due to those who went through the marital dissolution, experience the strains of the ending of a marriage rather than to any benefits of marriage. So you can see a lot of those studies, build on this, very static way of looking at the relationship between marriage and health. Yeah, married people, do not necessarily stay married throughout the life course, and unmarried people, they may eventually marry, right? So And in the United States in particular, people spend much less time being married and more time, not married or cohabitation or stay divorced or remarriage, all kinds of possibilities. So, and also in particular, given the increasing prevalence of cohabitation, people will think whether cohabitation will just work the same way as marriage, but maybe as a weaker social institution. In the US, in European countries, I think marriage has changed so much. Nowadays, people, on average, could make multiple transitions, through this singlehood, marriage, cohabitation, dissolution, or even, widowhood. That's a sort of a situation Andrew Turing calls American marriage go round, just like a game, you see circling around. So we no longer can think of, the relationship between marriage and health in a very static way. And I think it is important that we need to think about, timing and when did a marriage take place or when did cohabitation take place, and also duration, how long it lasts, and order of union, whether you started with the relationship being cohabiting versus being married, all those in order. So those are the kind of things can be really important. So we are talking about this frequency, how often there is a union transition, and the sequencing, which how the union start, and those cumulative exposure that could have impact on health. So more recent work, did take into account, of the union history over the life course. One thing they look at is marriage, does it benefit, but I think the question is more like, how does it benefit? It could because one gets married very early or one gets married late, and how long that marriage lasts. For men, a long marriage and then divorce could have a worse health outcome for that person than a very short marriage followed by divorce. So those are the kind of marital timing and the duration could have an impact. So, but also you can think about throughout the life course, union history consists of really positive and also negative events or exposures, right? You're getting married and staying married, that could be beneficial. Or you get divorced and stay divorced, that could have negative consequences on someone's health. So those events and exposures throughout the life course could add up, right? And also get compound over time. So think about how it affects health. It could, when you are young, a little setbacks here or there may not have any impact on health, but those setbacks could add up. And over time, could have a cumulative experience on someone's health. And then it's going to affect someone's health in midlife or later life. That could have, that's really as a sort of a cumulative experiences of the early years of the union history. So recent studies have sort of taken into account this union history. So they, some of the previous study use number of marital, divorce, and widowhood transitions, just like how many marriages did that person have, or how many divorces did that person experience, and how long that person stayed married, including first marriage or second marriage. So there is this count trying to capture the marital history, but obviously, you're just adding those cumulative way or adding the number does not really account for the entire sequence of union history and how one starts, how long that one lasts, how that affects. There's interactions, for all these different union histories. So, this is not a surprise. When we look into health, marriage and health, we I think no longer are satisfied with a static relationship between marriage and health. We really want to look at sort of a history, and history very much throughout a person's life course, right? So, we'll just take this life course perspectives when we look at this relationship. So, life course, anything that we accumulate could be advantage or could be disadvantage, right? What even our daily behavior could be good for our health or could be not that great for our health. So this accumulation is really a useful, mechanism through which that we can examine social inequality and health disparity. It's just a very simple idea is those cumulative advantage or disadvantage, varies by social class, what education you have, high education, you may do things differently from those with lower levels of education, and also gender, right? It just is thinking about, division of labor and how it's hours in employment and all those kind of things could have an impact. And in the US, the race ethnicity is always a very important factor, looking into those differences and inequality. So yeah, so those are the things that where we could examine those social inequality, and also, we also thinking about union histories that really can be complex. So you think about, in tradition many years ago, one person, it's maybe a matter of how soon that person gets married, then we would expect that person to be married for a long period of time till death does the part, right? So today it can be a really, very different scenario. And also, midlife health may be attributable to union history of early relationships. So this is something, again, I just mentioned earlier, that health doesn't really happen quickly. It's not like you turn a switch on and someone all of a sudden gets better health or worse health, but it typically takes time, it gets add up, and those are kind of experiences that will be great, if we can use the life perspective to take them into account. So what we propose here is really thinking to use sequence analysis to try to capture this union history. In a sense, sequence analysis will really look into the order, the timing, and the duration of different union relationships. And then we will look into, all these sequences, along the way. We want to understand the heterogeneity in union history over the life course, how one's union history differs from another, right? So this is looking into differences across union history. And one thing, important about the sequence analysis is that sequence can capture interaction effects between those different union status. You can imagine when someone, got divorced, first married and got divorced at age 30, what happened to next could be really very different. One person could stay divorced for a very long period of time, and one person could go straight to get married and stay married, remarried, and then another person could go to a cohabitation, break up the relationship, and marry again. So when you look at this, first marriage episode, the impact of that on a person's health will be very different, right? Depending on the interactions between that person, their first marriage, what's coming next, that's also going to be playing a very different role. So we think, if we are able to capture this, union history, develop some, trajectories, so that would really kind of help us understand sort of the complexity of the union history. Then we can look at the relationship between union history and health. So that will be one way of understanding, not just a static way of looking at marriage and health, but building this, life course union history perspective to understand the differences. So anything you look at the differences in union history, you can look at the differences in health, And all these factors can very much explained or interpreted by, gender, race, and social class, as at least in the US settings. We all know, men receive more health benefits than women in marriage. And, so men who get married longer benefit more, right, than women in a sort of a longer relationship. So if that marriage ends, the consequences could be more severe for the husband than for the wife. So this is sort of a things you're looking into who benefits more and how long that marriage lasts could have an impact for men. So there's an interaction. We can see that gender not only affects union history, but also affects health disparities, right? So same way we can look into race, right? One is there's a structural discrimination against minorities in the U.S. that would more likely to lead to short-term unstable relationships. That's just minorities in the U.S. don't have stable relationship, and another reason is not that they don't want to be in stable relationship, but there are all kinds of things, jobs, residential patterns, and all other things for minorities in disadvantaged positions. So then that will really affect their family life and also the relationships. So they are going to have unstable relationships that could also lead into cumulative effects on health. But even marriage itself could benefit my race differently, right? Marriage works well. It could really help whites, give whites more health benefits than say African Americans. Even African Americans who are married may not enjoy the health benefits that whites will enjoy in a marital relationship. So the idea is marriage, supposing they're pooling resources, there will be more success among whites because they have more resources compared to African American couples. Even when they marry, they may not be able to pool the same kind of resources that could benefit their health. So in a way, it's very important to understand this racial and ethnic differences. But and another factor is education, right? Education is even, it is really right now, it's a big indicator in the US. So, it's between who has it, who doesn't have it, right? You see in the US, lots of differences today. Life expectancy, marriage, or anything you look at differs by education. Those with high levels of education are more likely to marry and then stay married in the US. And they are more likely to have children who enjoy, with the economic resources compared to those with, less education. So this is everything you look at in the US, education, health, and race are the two, very important indicators that can explain any of the inequality and also disparities. So current study, for this particular study, we try to, capture the entire history, union history, and as well as the independence of various union experiences, over the life course. We try to use the event history to use sequence analysis to capture this history. And we want to capture this complexity of union history through a combined measure of timing, right? Just when did any event happen, when did that happen, duration, and how long it happens, and a sequencing, which event happens first. So we want to capture that, this kind of relationship. And also, we want to summarize those different union histories and identify the type of trajectories that will be powerful enough for us to understand, the differences, whether that's by union history itself or by its relationship, with midlife health outcomes. And, while doing that, we understand, there are a lot of things that could affect union history, right? Family background, when whether your parents were married when you were age 14, for example, when you were a child, or maybe mother's education, and even your health when you were children could affect, your marriage trajectories, right? And so we try to measure like three types of controls, right? One is pre-sequence. If we start, people at a certain age getting married, we will, control for some of the variable that happen before even any union took place, right? So those are parents' background and other information. We could also capture some of the during sequence information because the union history is really long, right? It could be maybe starting age 18 to age 50 for this very long period of time. What were they doing? Their economic status, their health limitation could also affect union history and health. And maybe after sequence, after age 50, what's your health background and also your employment history, that could affect the health outcome. So looking at union history, single it out, but at the same time, really try to control to net of other factors to see how union history affects midlife health outcome. So the data we use is the National Longitudinal Study of Youth. It's an old survey, aged 14 to 22, when it started in 1979. It is a US sample. It started with a sample of 12,686. So that survey was followed very much every year until 1994. Then after 1994, then that survey was interviewed twice. Once every 2 years. So annually first, and then biannually afterwards. So it's continued today. So you can imagine, they were 14 to 22 in 1979. So today, the survey was still being collected. They are all 50s, and some already reached age 60s. So it's a really long, rich history with a very good retention rate, about 71%. So this NLSY survey can really give us a very detailed union history, very much starting like age 20, 22. We can follow them till they are age 50. So we're really having nearly 30 years of union history data to understand, to capture this sort of the important events in their life course. There are two types of dependent variables. One is more a measure of physical health, and it's like self-assessed health at age 50. There are other, health measures. We're still working on it, but self-assessed health usually is a very, important variable that could measure someone's physical health. So it is very much based on a simple question. So in general, would you say your health is excellent, very good, fair, or poor, right? So it is this is a very simple variable, but really captures a good part of the health differences among the populations. And we also try to measure depressive symptoms. Just asking people at age 50, what's their mood, what are their mental health issues. It is based on this CESD scale. So it adds up from 0 to 21 based on 7 questions. So the 7 question, every question you give a score to 0, you don't have that symptom. 3, you have that symptom most of the time. So potentially the highest score is 21. It meaning that you have those symptoms most of the time for every single question. So the question includes like this, one is, first question, I felt depressed, you then ask, it's rarely or never, up to 3. Then the second one is that I could never get going, or I felt everything, I did was an effort, was difficult. So this is sort of a mental health to look at the relationship. Just keep in mind is, physical health and mental health could work very differently. Physical health, like chronic disease or other illnesses, could be really a function of, cumulative experiences or negative or positive experiences that could lead into, physical health disparities. Mental health, some scholars say can be a very short-term effect. When something happened to you and then you feel down or feel mentally depressed, that could come quickly rather than takes 20 years to build or 30 years to build. Just to keep that in mind, the physical health and mental health could be measures of different things, right? So we also use, given the very rich history of the National Longitudinal Study of Youth, we also use a bunch of covariates. One is, important covariates that we want to control throughout is gender, race, and the class. So race in this particular case is, broken down by being white, Black, or Latino. And class is measured by educational attainment. We're looking to, high school or less, some college, and the college more. Then we use some pre-sequence variables that, as I introduced, sort of things happen before age 20, right? We have your parents were married when respondents were 14. So if the idea, if children grew up in single parent families, they were more likely to have unstable, relatively unstable relationship. And also we can look into household income at that time and the mother's education at that time. And there were any health limitations for the respondent in 1979. And then there was this BMI measured in 1982. So those are sort of the economic, family background, and the health indicators before even they start the relationship, right? If there's poor health, that could affect the kind of relationship they are in. So we need to make sure they are taken into account. There's also during sequence variables. It is very much between age 20 to age 50, right? That's a period of time. We just do this over that long period of time. We have a measure of average income, so getting the average of income throughout that period of the life course, and how many children they have in total, number of children born. And we also have their total health limitations. What are the things that prevent them from, working or other things. And also they see how often they have this rigorous exercise and whether they were ever a smoker. So that's, again, it's the, some of the family background information, some of the health information, and some economic status. Then we look at after sequence variable, we look at income at age 50, because we're looking at health outcomes at exactly age 50, because that was a time, and else why I ask health module. There's a health module questions, a bunch of health questions. So all the health will be measured at age 50. So, but at the same time, we want to see their income and whether they were employed at age 50. It could be, an important indicators for the later health outcomes. Well, let me just give you a little walkthrough, what sequence analysis does. So, sequence analysis, we try to calculate the distance, right, in order to quantify how similar or different union history are from each other through what we call optimal matching and a Hamming distance. So we try to compare two individuals, one person's union history and another person's union history, we want to compare these two to see how close they are, right? So we try to calculate it, we'll match the one, they are exactly the same, and look at those who are different, how different they are. So that's sort of the idea of doing the sequence analysis. Then we use this hierarchical clustering to find clusters of relationship pathways in our data. So you want to look at, of all these different individual union histories, how can we group them, right? We'll group them in a certain ways. The goal is really to find n groups of observations that minimize the differences between observation in the same group and maximize the differences between observation in different groups, right? So within one group, we want to make those union history differences as small as possible, right? At the same time, between groups, we want to maximize the differences between groups so that every group will be uniquely different from other groups, but within each cluster, within each group, they will be as similar as possible so that they are the same kind of people that we are dealing with. So this is sort of the basic idea of doing this. So in programming wise, first of all, we want to quantify the degree of difference between every pair of observation in the data set. So what the programming does is really making comparison between every pair and to look at the differences and the similarities. Then they will run this clustering algorithm so that they will be setting them apart depending on the differences, right? Then that will eventually they will sort it through, provide maybe a recommended range of clusters, how many clusters are needed to summarize this union history, for all the people in the data set. Then we can try to interpret the results. So there are many ways to measure how different two relationship trajectories are. There are a lot of different ways, but this is sort of give you an example. We could count the minimum number of changes necessary to make sequence analysis identical. We could also weight the cost of each change by how different, certain cases are different from each other. We could also count the longest common subsequence. There are many others we can do. So this is ID1 and ID2. Those in green, they are identical. So there's no need to do any change. And then we just look into those brown, I don't know, it's brown color ones. So these are the differences. But these differences could represent a different distance, right? If you're replacing married with cohabiting or replacing married with single, it means slight different meanings. Cohabiting a little closer to marriage and a single a little further away. And also you can look at married and divorced. So this is sort of the distance that we're talking about. How do we calculate distance between these three individuals? How much it costs for us to put them in the one cluster. But obviously putting in one cluster idea is we want to reduce the differences between the two, right? And if they are so different, then we'll separate them and move to different clusters. So there are really pros and cons of using different distance matrix. So we tried several approaches and very much settled on this distance called Hamming distance. So essentially we have a substantive interest in how the timing of marriage or divorce associated with midlife health outcomes. So Hamming distance is more sensitive to the timing than some of the other matrix. So we think when you got married, when you got divorced, that's a timing is important to us, and Hamming distance is more sensitive to that. So that will be one way for us to understand that. But there are other things we can do, some dynamic Hamming distance that could use the other way. So there are a lot of different options we can use, but certainly some of the judgment helps us to narrow down this particular method. So this is the idea of clustering, right? So, we could have the program to do, we only need 2 groups. Then it will give us this 2 groups between the 2. But you can also imagine that we need to split them into 3 groups, or maybe 4 groups, or maybe even more groups, right? So in a sense, this R software, the programming will provide us those options. It just divides the data into smaller and smaller groups, and then you can find the split that will minimize the total variance within each group. So this is, program can provide us as many clusters as you want, depending on the parameter you specify. But it can also be as small as you want, depending on what you need. But in this case, clustering program doesn't really do. We don't rely on it 100%. We also need to rely on some subjective, judgment. When it is a good time for us to think about it. So basically, 2 factors for us to determine how do we decide on the sequencing and the clustering, right? There are 2 desirable characteristics when choosing the optimal sort of the clusters. One is parsimony. We want, do n number of clusters reduce within group differences significantly more than the other number of clusters, right? You want to look at, is n good enough? You don't want to have too many. It's not parsimonious. As few as possible if you achieve the purpose. But then also at the same time, you think about, theoretically, do clusters, make sense theoretically? Do they represent groups, that sort of give us a kind of real world example? So, so that we can answer the questions, right? So this is another way you're thinking about it theoretically, what would be a good way? So we rely on, the programming, but at the same time, rely on our judgment based on theoretical expectations. So one is not necessarily more important than the other, right? It often requires some judgment and there's no ground truth to it. So this is what, R gives us. It says it's measuring the cluster quality. So you can see in this particular case, there's a little gain from both measure was sort of flattened, kind of towards like a 10 to 14, that kind of suggesting, it's around 12 clusters could be as good. So it is for us is to look at, okay, this is where we should make the cutoff, and then we see whether the data we derive so make any sense. If it makes perfect sense, that will be a good combination. That's how we need to decide to use. So after comparing solutions with 4 to 12 clusters, and we determine 10 cluster solutions, sort of really kind of help us understand sort of the union histories. So this is really what it looks like. You can think about, I don't know whether you can see clearly at the bottom that we have, cohabiting, and in the cohabitation, and being single, and divorced, and married, and widowed, right? So this is sort of give us a landscape of, what are the potential distribution of these different union histories. As you can see, yellow meaning, marriage, right? For example, type 1 is that you started with being single and then get married pretty late, right? Age 30 and later, but mostly will stay married, throughout the life course. And the type 2, is really get married pretty early, right? And also there's all yellow, so that means early marriage and stay married. And then type 3, for example, you start to see but what you notice is that there's a lot of divorces starting in the 30s, right? This is what we call early divorce. They start at age 30, then a lot of divorces and stay divorced. In comparison to type 6, this is sort of, there's a late divorce, right? And you got late divorce in the 40s and later, and then, but marriage after divorce. So you can get this timing. You can also get the sequence. You can also get the order, right? So these are these are sort of a different things, we can, come up with some analysis based on the clusters. Descriptive statistics, you can take a look at, we define these relationships. There's earliest marriage, early marriage, then the later marriage, and the late relationship. They could be any kind of relation, cohabitation, other relationship. Married, then cohabit. There's early divorce, then later divorce. There's multiple cohabitation. So all these kinds of things. What you notice is it really differs by, gender, and the race and education, right? Now, obviously, for women are much more likely to be in earliest marriage. They typically marry before men do. And then you can see they are also more likely to be in divorce state than men, right? Now, for example, the female 5.8% was in early divorce and 6.4% was in later divorce, compared to men, which have lower, so which means men were more likely to be in other relationships rather compared to women after divorce, right? So those are kind of things you can see gender differences. You can also see racial differences, and you can also see educational differences. We can also look into this 10 clusters, by their self-rated health. So this is a percentage of people rated as being fair or poor health, right, by union history. Again, it seems like it's very important to notice there's a differences in health, right? So, early marriage, 12.7% say they were poor or fair health. So they had the best health. And then later marriage, so early marriage meaning those are married in the 20s, early, and the later marriage is late 20s and early 30s. And then earliest marriage is pretty much married before age 20. So you can see there are differences, and those who had worse health outcomes are those widowed, right? It's 29.3%. And also two divorce groups, early divorce 26.3%, and later divorce 27.7%. And a multiple cohabitation was also had a higher, poor health, right? Higher prevalence of poor health. We can also see depression. Depression score differences are relatively small compared to the self-rated health, but again, it's very evident that early marriage, later marriage, have lower mental depression scores compared to some other groups, right? The married and then cohabited, they seem to have the highest depressive symptoms compared to the others. So we then try really to see how gender, race, class, and also pre-sequence, during sequence, and after sequence variable affect those 10 clusters. What you see, for example, we can look at model 1. Model 1 is without any control. It's just the 10 clusters. So you can see 10 clusters, play a big role. For example, divorce after age 40, right? This coefficient is 2.22. That's odds ratio, right? And also divorce before age 40 is 40%. So this is meaning that, those who experience the divorce and stay divorced had really high levels of poor health compared to those, the reference group is those who married in late 20s and early 30s and stay married, right? So this is sort of differences, just looking at these 10 clusters. But then if we control gender and race and education, then so the differences are smaller, and that certainly, is highlighting the importance of those clusters still have its own independent effect after gender, race, class are taken into account. And then we introduce pre-sequence variable in model 3, and then we have during sequence variable in model 4, and then we have after sequence variable in model 5. They all really sort of explain away, some of the differences in union history. But what's interesting is that in model 6, we combine all these variables together. What stood out is really 3 groups, right? One is divorce before age 40 and stay divorced, and divorce after age 40 and stay divorced. And those who went through multiple cohabitations, right, seem to have a higher odds of having poor health, even when gender, class, race, and sequence variables are taken into account. So at least it says, it has impact, union history and when they divorce, and also multiple cohabitation could really have a toll on people's physical self-rated health. We do the same thing for mental health. Mental health, very much similar, but the coefficients are fewer. What's interesting is only married, then divorced, and then cohabited seem to have a stronger effect of mental health outcome. So one thing is mental health, the relationship between union history and mental health is not as strong as self-rated health and the union history, right? So this is what we talk about self-rated health as physical health. It seems more important, a strong predictor of health than the mental health. So let me just conclude. I think one is it's important to use a life course perspective that we can capture this cumulative advantage and disadvantage. So that's really one important way that we can look into social inequality and health disparities, right? And the idea is every union transition, early in life and middle stage in life may activate the body's response to stress and contribute to chronic health conditions. And then those conditions, especially self-rated health or physical health, may emerge and become serious until midlife, right? So mental health could be more short-term, one part, but I think physical health could take a longer term. We can see union history trajectory varies by gender, race, and education. And then, this is the point I just mentioned. And we see that, marital resource and crisis models still are useful, but really we need to expand the kind of a union history to really understand it's not really a static impact at one point in time, but it's a more longer effect on what union history does to someone's health. I think I'm out of time. Should I make sure that we have time for questions?
I think we have, good timing. Thank you so much for this very comprehensive and exciting talk. And so now the floor is open for questions, comments, anything on your mind. Audience? Yeah, Vincent, I see Vincent have a question. Yeah, Vincent, please, you may post your question now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm hearing.
Hi. Thank you, Prof. Qian, for the very interesting presentation. I really learned a lot from your presentation. I have a question, and it pertains to so you have the sequence, you have the ordering, and these duration and so on, and these things are important. But I'm just wondering, and it might be correlated in some sense, but isn't it the quality of the marriage that is actually a more proximate factor that determines the health and not really the timing or the order or the duration? Now, the reason why I ask this, right, is because in the model that you show, in the first model, you have the 10 clusters, and actually the R square is quite small, 1.7%, right? But then later on, when you add the during sequence variables, the R square shoots up to something like 12%. So it may not be the order or the sequencing per se that explains the health outcomes, but what happens during the sequencing, which may in some sense capture the the quality dynamics of the marriage and so on. So the question is really this: is it the timing, the ordering of the union history that makes the difference, or is it what happens within the trajectory, such as the quality of marriage and so on, that actually is the more proximate factor to determine the outcomes? Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a great question. You asked about quality of marriage. So yeah, so that will be, that will be part of the union history, right? You have marriage is one part of the union history, but they also, it is, yeah, we don't have this measure in quality, and it is very subjective, and it's difficult to come up with a good measure, especially longitudinally. But I think that will be an important question to look at. And I think you're right. And you're looking to R square here, but it is starting from 0.02, then increase to 0.20, right? For the last model.
0.117, I think, for model 4.
Yeah, for model 4, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one is it is a pseudo R square, so it's not R square, so it's it is a rough measure of R square. But the second thing that, yeah, you're right. I think it could be part of the story, but just like anything else in the US, for example, it's a gender, race, class is always very powerful, and then a lot of other things, and also very basic idea of a health, income. These are just so important to explain later life health outcomes. So I think these are the really powerful, like you said, sequence variable. Those are very powerful variables that we have to control, right? But you're right, and I think I wouldn't be surprised they have more explanatory powers than some of the union history, just because they are so closely related to later life health.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So actually, I would like to follow up on Vincent's question regarding the nature and the actual functionality of the marriage, because I understand that the purpose of the paper is to looking at the union history on health outcomes. But still, if you think about it, whether or not having children and like how many children, and actually children or the responsibility of child rearing may largely differ across unions. So, for example, like childbearing out of wedlock may exert like great stigma and social pressures and may do harm to the health. But on the other hand, not having children within marriage may do the opposite. And that means that I see that you have controlled for a number of children, but I mean that it is possible that actually the influence of children may actually differ across the actual union status, and making this actual functioning of marriage or any relationships different. And now I guess chance to just ask my second question. I see that you have controlled for like quite a rich set of variables, pre-sequence, during sequence, after sequence, but all of them are on individual level or family level. But thinking that actually we are covering quite a wide time window, like almost 40 years, and so lots of things have been changed, right? And so regarding gender ideology, regarding racial relationships, regarding social inequality, and so on, and those individuals may actually move places, right? And so like different places may have very different political, culture, economic landscapes as well. And so in a way, I'm like not entirely sure that to what extent that such a health outcomes might be driven by those individual unique history, and to what extent it's actually reflected by the interplays of individual, family, and more macro level social processes. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, these are two great questions. Yeah, so you're right on about just number of children. So right now, it is just simply a control. I think, I think it will be helpful is, we could also do another sort of a two-way sequence analysis and looking at children, right? When did they have children, and how many they have children, how many children they have, throughout the life course. So that's actually something that we are talking about, and use that, to see how, timing of children, number of children, and in what circumstances do you have children, then, that would affect, the health outcomes, and, that will be also very, very important. But right now, I think we'll just give the rough idea, like, okay, how many children that could have an impact on, later health outcomes. Yeah, but that's definitely something we want to look further. Yeah, the second question is about, these are individual factors. There could be a lot of other things going on, throughout 40 years of history, cohort effect, the period effect, the historical effects. Yeah, so one way that we are, planning to do is, going to do some county level, kind of a multi-level analysis, just see within county what are the characteristics, where they are, where do they live, and the county's economic status could affect, their well-being. And yeah, so, but I think period effect will be hard to do, because we only have one cohort. We don't have a cross-sectional sample of different people. Then that could be explain, different life course, different time period. It could affect them, but one cohort, like, we just won't be able to tease out whether that cohort differences is because of the changing over time or changing other circumstances. But that's definitely a kind of a weakness, right? I think, we have 1997 in NLSY. We can do another cohort as a comparison, see whether there's any period effect that could confound the relationship that we're seeing. But these are two great questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Qian. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, I see that now it's already very late at your place, and it's probably yeah, then that's it. And then let's put our hands together and thank Prof. Qian for the wonderful talk. And also, like today's talk, I'll just conclude this semester's CLPR seminar series. And hope everyone will have a great weekend, and also later have a great term break. And I will see everyone next semester. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Qian. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.